Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast is number 1389. The topic is training, and the title is, How Many Warm-Up Sets Should I Do? So, I've talked about it before. About half or a little over half of my clients are actually personal trainers themselves. I love it. It's a ton of fun. We talk about a lot of things other than just their own training and nutrition. We often talk a lot about their clients. One of my clients, personal training clients, we recently had a conversation about how many warm-up sets that they should have their clients do. They were feeling like a little kind of confused about the balance between needing to warm up the client but not wear them out. This trainer has kind of a variety of clients in regards to what their capacity is and kind of their skill levels. So it's kind of challenging for them because they're feeling like in some cases they use very little warm-up sets, in some cases they use a lot, and they're like, should they be the same with all clients? Should I actually have it individualized? So they were just kind of a little bit of a doubt. So we talked through some things and came up with some topics that I thought would be good for a podcast discussion. So we were discussing 4 factors to consider when deciding on how many warm-up sets you would need. Now, this would be for you individually as the listener, or if you are a trainer, this could be something that you could apply to all of your clients. So it's really meant kind of like as a broad-based thing. But the 4 kind of areas we talked about was the need to warm up the actual muscles. That's one component that factors into how many warm-up sets you need. You also then would be the need to practice the technique. Is it a very complicated lift? Very complex, like say, barbell squat, bench, or deadlift, or is it like, crunches, where, it doesn't really make sense to warm up crunches. So is it something that has technique involved? Do you need more technique work? Do you need less technique work? Then the purpose of the movement, or are you warming up with the intent to maximize the weight load, or are you warming up with the intent just to kind of beat up the muscles and beat up the body? That's going to cause a different response, a different number of working sets. Then also general fitness level of you or your client. Do you have good overall kind of work capacity, or are they really kind of out of shape, inefficient, and they can't really do much? So those factors are going to kind of play into it. I'm sure there's more. We had 30 minutes, so this is what we got into. So we could sit here and think of more, but I think this is a good place for most people to start and kind of at least get your wheels turning and think it through a little bit. So if we look at the need to warm up the muscles, you can do that directly or indirectly. So directly would be, I talked to the client, was an older client I had. He was, I think he was in his 60s or so. He had multiple shoulder surgeries related to youth athletics and then also a work accident. And it almost ripped his arm completely off, and they had to re-sew everything together. So his shoulder was all jacked up. But he was still strong as hell. So it was okay, well, it's kind of like getting something old and rusty, get moving. It might take a little more motion. It might take a little more movement. So one of the examples we had was for his dumbbell presses. We liked doing a lot of dumbbell presses because it worked a lot of the stabilizers of his shoulder. So rather than doing a machine press, which we still did from time to time, or a barbell press, which we still did from time to time, those things, if they're more guided in their balance, like a machine kind of tells you you're only going in one place. So whether you're pushing crooked or not, it doesn't matter. So the machine kind of balances for you. So it works the bigger muscles, but it doesn't work a lot of the kind of stabilization muscles. Whereas a barbell, it does have more instability to it, but only if you're laying down, it would be the bar could fall towards your face or it could fall towards your hips, but your hands can't fall inward or outward because they're on the bar. So dumbbells offered us the greatest recruitment of the stabilizing muscles. So we would do those first, and then we would go to a barbell or a machine type press. So when we did his shoulders, when we did his chest presses, we would do various degrees of incline and whatnot, but we commonly, if we're going to working sets, he could do working sets of 5 to 10 reps or so, around 65 to 75 pounds. So he's a pretty strong dude. Now, we would actually do 20 pounds for 20 reps, 30 pounds for 20 reps, 40 pounds for 10 reps, 50 pounds for 5 reps, 55 pounds for 5 reps, 60 pounds for 2 reps, and then we would go into his 65 to 75 kind of working sets. Now, why the hell did we do all that? Because he liked the 20-pound dumbbells for 20 reps just to kind of get a little bit of water flow, blood flow, get kind of the shoulder moving. It wasn't heavy enough to kind of pull at any tissues, so it kind of gave his joint a sense to kind of get flushed with fluid and start to kind of work on evening out some of the musculature tensions. The 30 pound for 20 reps did the same thing, but kind of more forced at the end ranges of the muscle, kind of opened up more of the tight tissues. The 40 pound for 10 reps, same thing. Now, if we had done 40 for 20, it would have started to kill his strength, but 40 for 10 didn't really wear him out. So he liked that as well. 50 pounds we only did for 5 reps because at that point everything's kind of sort of opened up, but you're still waiting to see how the shoulder's going to do that day. Is it going to be a good day or not a good day? So he wanted small weight jumps to kind of get a feel for how the shoulder was that day, but we weren't trying to wear out the muscles. So we would do the 50 for 5, the 55 for 5, and the 60 pounds for only 2 reps. That way he got to kick him back into position, he got to stabilize, he got to see what it felt like. He would just go 1, 2, done. So that way he got an idea of what it was feel like, he got loaded into the tissues, but he didn't wear himself out. So if we did that whole routine, right there I think is 62 reps of work before he even got to his working sets. But it worked great for him. That was what allowed him to feel confident. He had crazy work capacity. He was a manual laborer and you couldn't wear this dude out if you wanted to. So no worries there. But on that top end strength, we didn't want to wear him out too much or, cause any of the stabilizers to be too exhausted we can get an injury. So there was a balance between getting enough sets in that he got to warm up the muscles, warm up the joint, got to see how the weight was going to feel that day. But it still preserved enough energy by having the descending rep counts per set that he could still have good working sets. Now that's a direct warm up with the intent of warming up the muscles. You could also do an indirect warm up for warming up the muscles. So, for example, I might have a client do sled push pulls and box jumps before they do squats and deadlifts. So that way we don't need to do as many warm-up sets of squats and deadlifts, which can take a lot of time. So this is kind of a faster way to warm somebody up than the direct way of just making them do a crap ton of squats and deadlifts. And we got to focus on other components such as explosion. Now, could you have them do say banded deadlifts or banded squats to warm up and then take off the bands and that would build explosion? Sure. There's more than one way to do these things. But for one of the clients I'm thinking of, for example, he was an athlete. So we liked the push-pulls with the sled. We liked the box jump because it was a little bit of odd positions, little different angles on the muscles, different type of loading systems into the tissues and the joints. So it had more complexity of benefits rather than just repeating squats and deadlifts for a bunch of warm-up sets. So that's one kind of some examples for when you're picking warm-up sets specifically with the intent of warming up the muscles. You can do that directly or you can do that indirectly. Then we have the concept of focusing, thinking of, does this person need practice for technique? So are they, maybe they're a new client, excuse me, or it's a new exercise for them. So they might need more technique work. So you're going to have more warm-up sets so that way they can practice the technique. So for example, if you're getting somebody in barbell squats and maybe their working sets are around 200, maybe 225 pounds, somewhere in there, you might have them squat the bar for 5 reps. You would discuss, often when I'm working with somebody who's newish to lifting, they want everything to be perfect. And they feel like if they're not perfect, they're a failure. And it's oh my gosh, you have not even got enough practice at this to even believe that you should be perfect. So it's kind of odd. If somebody's brand new at something, they think they should be perfect at it. And it's how the hell would you be perfect? You're brand new. So typically they'll do the bar for 5 reps. They'll feel I think I got 4 to my toes, or I think this, or I think that. And I'm it's okay. So sometimes the first few sets are going to feel a little inconsistent because they're still building that kind of autopilot, those automatic mechanics that happen when you don't even think of it. So if we think about driving home from work, we're often not even paying attention to what we're doing. It's just something we do every day. If I brush my teeth, I'm not even usually paying attention to what I'm doing. It's just the things I do every day. So the squat, if it's a new client or new exercise for them, even if it's whatever the exercise is, they're not going to have that autopilot built up yet. So confirming to them that it's okay if it feels a little squirrely here and there. You want them to be consistent as possible, but also recognize that they might not be able to be as consistent at this point because they don't have that autopilot built up. Then they might do 95 pounds for 5 reps, and you might look and say, okay, there's like a correct technique issue I want to look at. So maybe they aren't rooting their feet and getting like their hips and glutes like better engaged. So you want to kind of coach them to do that. Then they do 135 for maybe 3 reps. You confirm that they did a really good job with rooting the feet that time. But maybe you're like, well, we want to keep that really good job there, but our mid back could be a little bit tighter in our setup. I really want you to, instead of like pulling on the bar, I want you to really think of squeezing between your shoulder blades. So you're going to kind of confirm what they just did, give them maybe another cue to work on. Then at 185, maybe you have them do, 1 or 2 reps. You confirm that the cues that they were doing were really good. And then maybe you'll say, hey, remember that as we get to a weight that's over your body weight, if it starts to get kind of heavy, the bar is going to feel like it's pushing you forward on the way down. So make sure you kind of lean back into that bar a little bit on the way down and pay attention to pressurizing through your heels. We want to see, if we were to film you from the side, we don't want to see your heels lift at the bottom of the exercise. We want them to see planted right down on the ground. So if there was a piece of paper under your heel as you're squatting, you shouldn't let me be able to pull that paper out from underneath your heel. So we want to do a good job. You're doing a great job with the rooting cue. Back was super tight, freaking awesome. So on the way down on this one, just really be mindful of kind of keeping your heels pressed into the floor. They crush it. And they're like, okay, great, let's do 200 pounds for 1 rep. And you confirm that what they're doing is great. You encourage them, tell them that they're freaking doing awesome. We have a couple warm-up sets already in, and you're already right where you need to be technique-wise. So let's go right to 210, maybe 215 for some working sets. So that's kind of how you would do it, is you give them some practice to get up there. So just in that example, they would have, 5 or 6 kind of sets to kind of practice it. Then we also have, what if somebody's more experienced? So there's a balance here, because in a more experienced lifter, they're probably going to have heavier weight loads. So they might not need as many warm-up sets based on how heavy they're going, but it might end up being the exact same amount of warm-up sets just because they have to go so much further. So for example, if I have somebody who's warming up to, say, 365 pounds on a squat, I might have them do the bar for 3 reps, 135 for 3, 225 for 3, and then maybe they're kind of getting too aggressive by pushing back into the bar. Sometimes people will, they'll pull through their lower back to arch back into the bar, and I'm like, hey, awesome intensity here, but remember that we push back into the bar from creating a double chin. I want you to push your chin back into the bar, not try to contract your lower back to pull yourself back into the bar. So as soon as you hit the bottom, chin to the bar. Then all of a sudden you do 275 for a double, like 1 or 2 reps. Encourage them, tell them they did great. You hit 315 for 1, and then you go to 365. So it might end up being 5 warm-up sets, which is exactly what the person at 210 pounds did. But if you notice, their weight increments were smaller increases than the person who was stronger. So the person who was stronger, they're taking bigger weight jumps. So they might need less warm-up sets in concept based on the weight they're going to, but it might end up being the same number of warm-up sets compared to somebody else who's going to a much lighter weight. So this is why I can't stand giving numbers and why I like talking about concepts, because if you just tell somebody you should be at your working weight in 7 working sets, 7 warm-up sets. Well, if somebody's squatting 700 pounds versus somebody squatting 135, if you try to do 7 warm-up sets before 135, what would be the point? You'd have like a 45-pound bar, then maybe 65 pounds, 75 pounds, 85 pounds, 95 pounds, 105 pounds, and then all of a sudden maybe you're there. And it's just like 10-pound jumps aren't meaningful. They're not. Like when you're, under, say, 80% of your max of what weight you're going to use. So if I'm going to use 100 pounds, whether I do a warm-up at 20 pounds versus 30 pounds doesn't make any damn bit of difference. So as you go as you get closer to the working weight, you're going to take smaller and smaller weight jumps. But small weight jumps further away, like at lighter weights, don't really make much of a difference. So the idea of this concept is practicing the technique. If somebody does need more technique practice, then warm up with the direct method And go ahead and have them take, 5, 6, 7 sets. Give them cues along the way, really refine it, make sure that the technique looks crisp before you get to your working sets. If somebody doesn't need that, so maybe they're, kind of a more experienced athlete, well, you might do the indirect method. So I might have them do the sled push pulls, box jumps. And then we're going to do the less warm-up sets because they're already stronger. So like I said, if they're doing 365, maybe have them do the bar, 135, 225, 275, 315, then boom, 365. So that's some things to think through. Then you also have the purpose of the movement. Are they doing the movement to peak their performance? You want maximal weight on that bar. Maximal weight on the bar. Or are you doing it to provide a stimulus for change, meaning the weight isn't really what's important, you're just wanting to beat the crap out of the person and it should feel really freaking hard. But whether they, if they're doing dumbbell overhead presses, whether they get to 60s or 65s, it doesn't make that much of a difference. You're just trying to make sure the muscles feel stressed and challenged. Well, if the purpose of the movement is peak performance, maximal weight load, then you want to minimize the warm-up sets as much as possible and minimize the reps per set as much as possible. Now, you still need whatever that person needs to feel ready. But like, for example, when I've done some powerlifting meets, I tend to be very keyed up and I have to calm myself down. My body will kind of go numb and I just kind of get like super freaking ready and excited to do things. So I'll warm up for squats as controlled as I can. I'll do my bench. And then for deadlift, I've done a couple meets where I just walk over, I load the bar, I pull a single rep at 315, I pull a single rep at 495, and then I just go right into my my first attempt. I don't need a lot because I'm freaking ready to go, So it's kind of like if that's what that person needs, then that's it. You do the minimal amount. I don't want to wear myself out. I'm freaking ready to go. So that's worked out really well for me. But that might not be what's best for you. So I've trained clients, like I've trained people for powerlifting meets to elite totals and, a bunch of records and all this stuff. So there's some athletes where they're hyper nervous. So you want to burn up some of that nervousness with practice sets. Maybe I won't have them do a lot of reps because we're not trying to wear them out. But if you have, say a female going to pull 405 on deadlift, I might have them do 135 for a single, 185 for a single, 225 for a single. Maybe we'll kind of see how they're feeling. If they're feeling a little antsy, I'll say, do another 225. I want to kind of see what your shin's looking like, see the positions, So do 225 for a single. Then we go 275, then 315. So you kind of like work your way up there with just some singles. If they need more of those sets to kind of calm themselves down. So it really depends. Like some of the people I work with, they're fired up and they're ready to like murder somebody. And then other people are all up in their head and you have to get them to calm down. So the people who are all up in their head and get them to calm down, it kind of depends. Or they are worrywart about like technique, then I have to simplify that and try to get them to think less about it. Or if they're just like super antsy and then focusing on technique helps calm them down, well, that's what I have them focus on. So it's really learning the individual to know what is going to help them be mentally ready and physically ready at the exact same time. Then if you're looking at, okay, well, I'm doing warm-ups and I'm not really trying for peak weight, I just want to maximize the muscle tissue damage. Well, then you can add warm-up sets or reduce warm-up sets, add reps, reduce reps, kind of whatever you need that day to feel ready. If their general fitness is something you have to build up, maybe you have to add more. If it's not something you have to build up, maybe you add less. It also depends on kind of what rep scheme you're doing for the day. Are you doing like descending reps where they do a challenging set of, say, 8 to 10, then a challenging set of 6 to 8, then a challenging set of 4 to 6? Maybe warm them up towards the 10s, but you don't need to do 10 reps every single warm-up set. But maybe that person likes to do it. Maybe you're doing ascending reps. So you're doing a set of 2, then a set of 4, then a set of 6. Maybe you're doing pyramids where you do 6, 4, 2, 4, 6, or reverse pyramid, 2, 4, 6, 4, 2. Maybe a wave load for the day. A set of 2, then a set of 3, then a set of 4, then a set of 2, 3, 4 again. So there's a lot of kind of ways that you would set up rep schemes that if I'm doing a high volume rep scheme, I'm going to reduce the volume of my warm-ups. If I'm doing a low volume rep scheme, then I might increase the volume of my warm-ups. I might not do more or less warm-up sets. I'll just do more or less reps per set. So there's a lot more openness to what you do if the working sets are not trying to be peaked out at top weight load, if it's just for maximal stimulus to the muscles. So that's kind of something to think through. Then the fourth one is just general fitness level. trying to like build a general kind of work capacity for the person. If the client doesn't have like great overall fitness or endurance, and that's one of their goals, maybe as equal importance to strength, then you definitely want to add in more warm-ups and more like reps per set of the warm-ups to help improve their overall kind of like work capacity. And that allows them to be able to get used to doing more work. And then the more work they get used to over time, you can make that more specific to kind of peak out at the best results for whatever their goals are. So we have podcast number 903 is a training podcast titled Strength Training, Building the Pyramid. And it talks about that concept that if I want to get a high peak, I have to have a wide base. And that's something you can build with warm-up sets, and it doesn't require you to add any extra time to the workout. You're just adding a couple extra reps per set, and all of a sudden, boom, you're building up a base. So maybe in their warm-up sets for the first month, I'm just making up stuff, by the way. For the first maybe 2 weeks, you have them do like 6 reps per warm-up set. The next 2 weeks, 8 reps per warm-up set. Next 2 weeks, 10 reps per warm-up set. And you just build that base underneath the top workload that you're doing. So it's a great way to kind of layer your programming to where they're not spending more time in the gym to build that base or having to come to the gym more often or have more training days. You're just modifying that through the warm-up sets. So there's a lot of variance here. And I don't know if I made this probably too complex, but it's just cool to know that there's this much to it. And I could probably sit here and we could probably think of even more components, but 4 is enough to keep your brain busy and probably make it feel overwhelmed. But it's cool to know that there is this much that goes into something as seemingly simple as warm-up sets. So there is no perfect warm-up number of sets or number of reps per set. It's really trial and error. It changes per person, per day, per goal. But generally, the bigger the movement, meaning more muscles or more weight involved, then you're going to want more warm-up sets. If you're wanting to peak to performance, like maximal weight loads, you want minimal reps needed per warm-up set. So even if you're just doing singles per weight, that's okay. But you want to work your way up there in weight so the person isn't shocked by the weight, but you don't want to wear them out, so you just do a bunch of singles and doubles maybe. If you're wanting to increase volume, as I said, you can kind of just increase the reps per warm-up set, and that helps build up the volume without adding a bunch of time. So hopefully this gave you a bunch to think through and kind of give you like an okay to playing with the number of sets and reps that you perform. There isn't necessarily a perfect thing to do all the time. There are things that are better to do than other things. But at the end of the day, it's trial and error, and it's just learning to figure it out. So I do this with all my clients. I have to figure out what's best for them. So you would have to go through the same process. You just got to trial and error. Maybe you try something one day and you feel like, oh, crap, I'm exhausted by my working sets. We'll do a little bit less next time. Or maybe you try something short. You get to your working sets, and you're like, holy crap, that was miserable. I really didn't feel best until like my 3rd or 4th or 5th working set. So it took me a while to feel good. Well, then maybe you want to add more warm-ups next time so you're ready by the first working set. So play with it. Have fun with it. If you have any questions, my email is brutalirongym@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope this stuff really is helpful. And if you have any questions, especially personal trainers, if you have any questions, I love this stuff. So please reach out. Our email is brutalirongym@gmail.com. Okay. Well, if you like today's podcast, please consider sharing the podcast. The more people we share it with, the more people can help. That's the whole goal. Thank you to the patrons of the podcast, people who financially support the podcast. It does cost well over $1,000 a year for hosting costs. I give an hour to it every day. I want to keep it for free, and I want to keep it daily. I love this stuff. So thank you to the patrons who support all the costs and expenses of this so we can keep it going. You can give donations at our website, www.brutalirongym.com. There's an option for a one-time donation, monthly donation, yearly donation. However you do it, I appreciate that you do it very, very much. We all do, so we can continue to listen to this. Also, if you like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. If you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything that you want to know, let us know at our email, brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.